Good evening. Grandakuti, the literary wing of Telugu Radha, along with the Supala Foundation, welcomes to the weekly introduction of writers and writings. In this week, we have chosen the great eminent international writer who was having Indian origin, means born in Bombay, India, a very reputed literature personality and Nobel Literary Prize awardee. He is Mr. Rudyard Kipling. Let us see his personality, life, achievements, and literary journey. Rudyard Kipling was born in Bombay, India, where his father, John Lockwood Kipling, was an arts and crafts teacher at the Jijibai School of Art. His mother, the farmer Alice MacDonald, was a sister-in-law of the painter Edward Burne-Jones. India was at the time ruled by the British Raj, as Kipling was affectionately called, was brought up by an ayah who taught him Hindustani as his French language. Kipling's writings at the age of 13 were influenced by the pre-Raphaelites, and he also had family connections to them. Two of his mother's sisters were married into the pre-Raphaelite community. At the age of 6, he was taken to England by his parents and left for 5 years at a foster home at Southsea Kipling. Southsea. Kipling, who was not accustomed to traditional English beatings, expressed later his feelings of the treatment in the short story Baba Black Sheep, in the novel The Light That Fails, and in his autobiography. In 1878, Kipling entered United Service College, a boarding school in North Devon. It was an expensive institution that specialized in training for entry into military academies. His poor eyesight and mediocre results as a student ended hopes about military career. However, these years Kipling recalled in light tone in one of his most popular books, Stalky and Company. Kipling's bookishness separated him from the other students. He had to wear glasses and was nicknamed Gigger for gig, that means carriage for lamps. Kipling returned to India in 1882, where he worked as a journalist in Lahore for Civil and Military Gazette and an assistant editor and overseas correspondent in Allahabad for Pioneer. The stories written during the last 2 years in India were collected in the Phantom Rickshaw. It, it that included the famous story The Man Who Would Be a King. Kipling's short stories and verses gained success in the late 1880s in England, to which he returned in 1889 and was hailed as a literary heir to Charles Dickens. When he toured Japan, he criticized the Japanese middle class for its eagerness to adopt Western fashions and values. Between the years 1889 and 1892, Kipling lived in London and published Life's Handicap, a collection of Indian stories that included The Man Who Was and Barrack Room Ballads, a collection of poems. In 1892, Kipling married Caroline Starr Ballister, the sister of an American publisher and a writer, with whom he collaborated a novel, The Naulahaka, in 1892. The young couple moved to the United States. Kipling was dissatisfied with the life in Vermont, and after the death of his daughter, Josephine, Kipling took his family back to England and settled in Barwash, Sussex. According to the author's sister, Kipling became a harder man, but also his political beliefs started to stiffen. During these years, Kipling produced many inventions: Jungle Book, a collection of animal stories for children, the second Jungle Book, and The Seven Seas. Widely regarded as unofficial poet laureate, Kipling refused this and many honors, among them the Order of Merit. During the Boer War in 1899, Kipling spent several months in South Africa. In 1902, he moved to Sussex, and spending time in South Africa, where he was given a house by Cecil Rhodes, the influential British colonial statesman. In 1901, appeared Kim, widely considered Kipling's best novel. The story, set in India, depicted adventures of an orphaned son of a sergeant in an Irish regiment. Soon after Kipling had received the Nobel Prize, his output of fiction and poems began to decline. In 1923, Kipling published The Irish Guards in the Great War, a history of his son's regiment. Between the years 1922 and 25, he was a rector at the University of St. Andrews. Kipling died on January 18, 1936, in London and was buried in Poets' Corner at Westminster Abbey. Kipling's autobiography, Something of Myself, appeared posthumously in 1937. Now we will know the other aspects of his life and also some silent features about his writings. The total life of the Kipling has been bifurcated as childhood between 1865 and 1882, education in Britain, and return to India. Early adult life was reckoned from 1882 to 1914. Then return to India, return to London, United States, life in New England, Devon, visits to South Africa, Sussex, speculative fiction, Nobel laureate and beyond, Freemasonry. Then First World War took place between 1914 and 1918. Death of John Kipling took place during this time. After the war, 1918 and 1936, death and legacy, links with camping and scouting, Kipling's Barwash home, and reputation in India. Kipling's birth home on the campus of the Judges School of Art in Bombay was for many years used the Duden's residence. Although a cottage bears a plaque noting it as his birth site, the original one may have been torn down and replaced decades ago. Some historians and conservationists take the view that the bungalow marks a site merely close to the home of Kipling's birth, as it was built in 1882, about 15 years after Kipling was born. Kipling seems to have said as much to the dean when visiting JJ School in the 1930s. Kipling wrote of Bombay, mother of cities to me, for I was born in her gate between the palms and the sea when the world and steamers wait. According to Bernice M. Murphy, Kipling's parents considered themselves Anglo-Indians, a term used in the 19th century for people of British origin living in India. And so too would their son, though he spent the bulk of his life elsewhere. Complex issues of identity and national allegiance would become prominent in his fiction. Kipling referred to such conflicts. For example, in the afternoon heats before we took our sleep, she, the Portuguese Aya or nanny, or Mita, the Hindu bearer or male attendant, would tell the stories, and Indian nursery songs, all unforgotten, and we were sent into the dining room after we had been dressed with the caution, speak English now to Papa and Mama. So one spoke English haltingly, translated out of the vernacular idiom that one thought and dreamed in. And his education was in Britain. And when he returned to India, near the end of his schooling, it was decided that Kipling did not have the academic ability to get into Oxford University on a scholarship. His parents lacked the wherewithal to finance him, and so Kipling's father obtained a job for him in Lahore, where the father served as principal of Mayo College of Art and curator of the Lahore Museum. Kipling was to be assistant editor of the local newspaper, the Civil and Military Gazette, and he sailed for India on September 1882 and arrived in Bombay on 18th October. He described the moment years later. So at 16 years and 9 months, but looking 4 or 5 years older and adorned, adorned with real whiskers, which the scandalized mother abolished him within hour of beholding. I found myself at Bombay, where I was born, moving among sights and smells that made me deliver to the vernacular sentences whose arrival changed Kipling, as he explains. There were yet 3 or 4 days rail to Lahore, where my people lived. After this, my English years fell away, nor ever, I think, came back in full strength. Then his adult life took place between 1882 and 1914. Again, he returned to England, and his life was spent in London, United States, and it also his life also went on in New England and Devon. In Devon, Kipling was now a famous man, and the previous 2 or 3 years had increasingly been making political pronouncements in his writings. The Kiplings had welcomed their first son, John, in August 1897. Kipling had begun work on 2 poems, Recessional and The White Man's Burden, which were to create controversy when published. Regarded by some as anthems for enlightened and duty-bound empire building, capturing the mood of the Victoria era. The poems were seen by others as propaganda for brazen-faced imperialism and its attendant racial attitudes. Still, others saw irony in the poems and warnings of the perils of empire. So, for example, take up the white man's burden, send forth the best your breed, go bind your sons to exile to serve your captive need, to wait in heavy harmness, unfluttered folk and wild, your new caught sullen peoples, half devil and half child. This was found in the white man's burden. There was also foreboding in the poems, a sense that all could yet to naught. For called our knives melt away, on dune and headland sinks the fire. Lo, all our pomp of yesterday is one with Nineveh and Tyre. Judge of nations, spare us yet, lest we forget. This is in recessional. A prolific writer, during his time in Torquay, he also wrote Stalky and Company, a collection of second stories born of his experience at the United Service College in Westward Ho, whose juvenile protagonists display a knowledge it all, cynical outlook, and patriotism and authority. According to his family, Kipling enjoyed reading aloud stories from Stalky and Company to them and often went into spasms of laughter over his own jokes. Then his visits to South Africa, Sussex, and speculative fiction was also flourished during this time. Kipling wrote a number of speculative fiction short stories, including The Army of a Dream, in which he sought to show a more efficient and responsible army than the hereditary bureaucracy of England at the time, of two science fiction stories, with the Night Mail and As Easy as ABC. Both were set in the 21st century in Kipling's aerial board of control universe. They read like modern hard science fiction and introduced the literary technique known as indirect exposition, which would later become one of science fiction writer Robert Heinlein's hallmarks. This technique is one that Kipling picked up in India and used to solve the problem of his English readers not understanding much about Indian society when writing the Jungle Book. Then the his life is awarded of Nobel laureate and beyond. In 1907, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature, having been nominated in that year by Charles Oman, professor at the University of Oxford. The prize citation said it was in consideration of the power of observation, originality and imagination, virility of ideas, and remarkable talent for narration which characterize the creations of this world famous author. Nobel Prizes had been established in 1901 and Kipling was the first English language recipient. It was a nice phenomena, and an Indian born the poet Rudyard Kipling got the first Nobel Literature in English language. At the award ceremony in Stockholm on 10th December 1907, the permanent secretary of the Swedish Academy Cad David at Verson praised both Kipling and 3 centuries of English literature. The Swedish Academy is in awarding the Nobel Prize in Literature this year to Rudyard Kipling desires to pay a tribute of homage to the literature of England, so rich in manifold glories, and to the greatest genius in the realm of narrative that that country has produced in our times. To bookend this achievement came the publication of two concerned poetry and story collections, Puck of Puck's Hill and Rewards and Fairies. The latter contained the poem If. In a 1995 BBC opinion poll, it was voted the UK's favorite poem. The exhortation to self control and stoicism is arguably Kipling's most famous poem. So the story went on like this: Freemasonry. According to the English magazine Masonic Illustrated, Kipling became a Freemason in 1985 before the usual minimum age of 21 years, being initiated into hope and perseverance. And Kipling so loved his Masonic experience that he memorialized in its ideas in his poem, The Mother's Lodge, and used the fraternity and its symbols as vital plot devices in his novels, The Man Who Would Be King and the First World War, 1914 and 18. Kipling had a scorn for men who shirked duty in the First World War. Yes. In, in the new army in training, Kipling concluded by saying, this much we can realize even though we are so close to it. The world safe instinct saves us from trump and exaltation. But what will be the position in years to come of the young man who has deliberately elected to outcast himself from this all embracing brotherhood? What of his family? And above all, what of his descendants? When the books have been closed and the last balance stuck of sacrifice and sorrow in every hamlet, village, parish, suburb, etc. So this went on like this. Then death of John Kipling, his wife, and after the war, 1918 and 1936. So here, partly in response to John's death, Kipling joined Sir Fabian Ware's Imperial War Grave Commission, now the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, the group responsible for the garden-like British war graves that can be found to this day dotted along the former Western Front and the other places in the world where British Empire troops lie buried. His main Contributions to the project were his selection of the biblical phrase, their name liveth for evermore, found on the stones of remembrance in larger war cemeteries, and his suggestion of the phrase known unto God for the gravestones of unidentified servicemen. He also chose the inscription, the glorious dead, on the cenotaph Whitehall, London. Additionally, he wrote a two-volume history of the Irish Guards. His son's regiment, published in 1923 and seen as one of the finest examples of regimental history. Kipling's short story, The Gardener, depicts visits into the war cemeteries, and the poem, The King's Pilgrimage, a journey which King George V made touring the cemeteries and memorials under construction by the Imperial War Graves Commission. When the increasing popularity of the automobile, Kipling became a motoring correspondent for the British press, writing enthusiastically of trips around England and abroad, though he was usually driven by a chauffeur. Kipling scripted the first royal Christmas message delivered via BBC's Empire Service by George V in 1932. In 1934, he published a short story in the Strand magazine, Proofs, Proofs of Holy Writ, postulating that William Shakespeare had helped to polish the prose of the King James Bible. In regard to death, the backdrop, Kipling kept writing until the early 1930s, but at a slower pace and with less success than before. On the night of 12th January 1936, he suffered a hemorrhage in his small intestine. He underwent surgery but died at Middlesex Hospital less than a week later on 18th January 1936 at the age of 70 of a perforated duodenal ulcer. His death had previously been incorrectly announced in a magazine to which he wrote, the I have just read that I am dead. Don't forget to delete me from your list of subscribers. The pallbearers at the funeral included Kipling's cousin, Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin, and the marble casket was covered by a unison jack. Kipling was cremated at Golden Green Crematorium in northwest London, and his ashes interred at Poets' Corner, part of the south transept of Westminster Abbey, next to the graves of Charles Dickens and Thomas Hardy. Kipling's will was proven on 6th April with his estate valued at 168 pounds, roughly equivalent to 11,000 115 lakhs 8,703 pounds in 2019. So his legacy also went on. Finally, The poet T.S. Eliot, finally, the poet T.S. Eliot edited a choice of Kipling's verse with an introductory essay. Eliot was aware of the complaints that had been leveled against Kipling, and he dismissed them one by one. That Kipling is a Tory, using his verse to transmit right wing political views, or a journalist pandering to popular taste. While Eliot writes, I cannot find any justification for the charge that he held a doctrine of race superiority. Eliot finds instead an immense gift for using words, an amazing curiosity and power of observation with his mind and with all his senses, the mask of the entertainer, and beyond that, a queer gift of second sight of transmitting messages from elsewhere, a gift so disconcerting when we are made aware of it that thenceforth we are never sure when it is not present. All this makes Kipling a writer impossible wholly to understand and quite impossible to belittle. That's what T.S. Eliot told. Of Kipling's verse, such as his Barrack Room Ballads, Eliot writes of a number of poets who have written great poetry, only a very few whom I should call great verse writers. And unless I am mistaken, Kipling's position in this class is not only high but unique. In response to Eliot, George Orwell wrote a long consideration of Kipling's work for Horizon in 1942, noting that although as a jingo imperialist, uh, Kipling was morally insensitive and aesthetically disgusting. His work had many qualities which ensured that while every enlightened person has despised him, nine tenths of those enlightened persons are forgotten, and Kipling is some in some sense still there. So one reason for Kipling's power was his sense of responsibility, which made it possible for him to have a world view, even though it happened to be a false one. Although he had no direct connection with any political party, Kipling was a conservative, a thing that does not exist nowadays. Those who now call themselves conservatives and either liberals, fascists, or the accomplice of fascists. He identifies himself with the ruling power and not with the opposition. In a gifted writer, this seems to us strange and even disgusting, but it did have the advantage of giving Kipling a certain grip on reality. This went on like this in the notings of George Orwell. In 1939, the poet W.H. Auden celebrated Kipling in a similarly ambiguous way in his elegy for William Butler Yeats. Arden deleted this section from more recent editions of his poems. However, we will read what it is. Time that is intolerant, of the brave and innocent, and indifferent in a week to a beautiful physique, worships language and forgives everyone by whom it lives, pardons cowardice, conceit, lays its honors at his feet. Time that with this strange excuse pardons Kipling and his views and will pardon Paul Claudel, pardons him for writing well. The poet Alison Brackenbury writes Kipling is poetry's Dickens, an outsider and a journalist with an unrivaled ear for sound and speech. The English folk singer Peter Balley was a lover of Kipling's poetry, much of which he believed to have been influenced by English traditional folk forms. He recorded several albums of Kipling's verse set to traditional airs or to tunes of his own composition written in a traditional style. However, in the case of the bawdy folk song, The Bastard King of England, which is commonly credited to Kipling, it is believed that the song is actually misattributed. Kipling often is quoted in discussions of the contemporary British political and social issues. In 1911, Kipling wrote the poem The Reeds of Runnymede that celebrated Magna Carta and summoned up a vision of the stubborn Englishry determined to defend their rights. In 1996, the following verses of the poem were quoted by former Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, warning against the encroachment of the European Union on national sovereignty. At Runnymede, who hear the reeds at Runnymede. You must not sell, delay, deny a free man's right or liberty. It wakes the stubborn Englishry. We saw them roused at Runnymede. And still, when mob or monarch lays too rude a hand on English ways, the whisper wakes the shudder place across the reeds at Runnymede, and Thames that knows the mood of kings, and crowds and priests and such like things, rolls deep and dreadful as he brings their warning down from Runnymede. Political singer-songwriter Billy Bragg, who attempts to build a left-wing English nationalism, in contrast with the more common right-wing English nationalism, has attempted to reclaim Kipling for an inclusive sense of Englishness. Kipling's enduring relevance has been noted in the United States as it has become involved in Afghanistan and other areas about which he wrote. Then links with camping and scouts, Kipling's Barwash home and reputation to India. Yeah, let us see what it is exactly. In modern day India, whence he drew much of his material, Kipling's reputation remains controversial, especially among modern nationalists and some post-colonial critics. Rudyard Kipling was a prominent supporter of Colonel Reginald Dyer, who was responsible for the Jallianwala Bagh massacre in Amritsar in the province of Punjab. Kipling called Dyer the man who saved India and initiated collections for the latter's homecoming prize. However, Subhash Chandra Bose, sorry, Subhash Chopra writes in his book Kipling Sahib, the Raj Patriot, and that the benefit fund was started by the Morning Post. The Morning Post newspaper, not by Kipling, and that Kipling made no contribution to the Dyer Fund, while Kipling's name was conspicuously absent from the list of donors, as published in the Morning Post. He clearly admired Dyer. Other contemporary Indian intellectuals, such as Ashish Nandi, have taken a more nuanced view. Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of independent India, often described Kipling's novel Kim as one of his favorite books. G.V. Desai, an Indian writer of fiction, had a more negative opinion of Kipling. He alludes to Kipling in his novel All About H. Hotterer. I happened to pick up R. Kipling's autobiographical Kim. Therein, this self appointed white man's burden bearing Sherpa fellers stated how in the Orient, blocks hit the road and think nothing of walking 1,000 miles in search of something. Indian writer Kushwant Singh wrote in 2001 that he considers Kipling's If the essence of the message of the Gita in English, referring to the Bhagavad Gita, an ancient Indian scripture. Indian writer R.K. Narayan said Kipling, the supposed expert writer on India, showed a better understanding. Supposed expert writer of India showed a better understanding of the mind of the animals in the jungle than of the men in an Indian home or Indian home or the marketplace. The Indian politician and writer Shashi Tharoor commented Kipling that flatulent voice of the Victorian imperialism would wax eloquent on the noble duty to bring law to those without it. In November 2007, it was announced that Kipling's birth home in the campus of the Judges School of Art in Mumbai would be turned into a museum celebrating the author and his works. Though best known as an author, Kipling was also an accomplished artist, influenced by the Aubrey Beardsley. Kipling produced many illustrations for his stories. Example, Just So Stories in 1919. Screen portals and bibliography are also there. So, keeping this background, a Rudyard Kipling's life, his journey, as well as the literary scenario, definitely it is having much influence on the Indian literary scenario and vice versa. So on eve of is coming um, death anniversary, we are paying a tribute through Grandakuti, uh, highlighting his life as well as his literary essence sectors as a part of a small introduction to the great man of literature who born in India and brought the first Nobel Literary Prize in his name for the animal life book, that is the Jungle Book. We we pay tributes, regards, and salutes to the great man of Rudyard Kipling, the literary perfect man of India, who brought fame to the entire world and also noble literary scenario. We thank all the viewers, readers of this story, and we'll come back with another prominent writer and writings. Thank you very much. Good night.